Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really strapping in for an essential exploration of, well, the future of intelligence systems.
Yeah.
We are drilling deep into a topic that's moved way beyond academia now, right into the boardroom mandate. Explainable AI, or XAI. This is really for you, the learner, who needs to quickly grasp why the future of tech really demands trust and transparency.
Absolutely.
And how this rapidly evolving stack of global standards is shaping pretty much every line of code being written right now.
That's exactly right. Our mission today is to, unpack this robust stack of source material. We need to understand the fundamental shift that's happening.
This move away from secrecy.
Yeah, this necessary migration from opaque black box of secrecy to transparent glass box accountability. We need to really dissect the intense regulatory forces accelerating this change globally, and crucially, define the specific technical tools and ethical frameworks that practitioners, well, they must employ today to build genuinely trustworthy systems.
So let's start at the beginning then. XAI. It sounds like high-level jargon maybe, but it seems like it's actually fundamental for getting advanced AI out of the lab and, into the real world. How do we define it at its core?
Well, at its core, explainable AI is basically the design methodology dedicated to making AI systems transparent, interpretable, and ultimately accountable.
Okay.
And this isn't optional anymore. It's absolutely vital in any high-stakes scenario. I mean, just think about the risk profile, right?
Like what?
An AI recommending a major surgical procedure in healthcare, maybe, or deciding who gets credit or parole in finance and criminal justice.
Huge impacts.
Or, even more immediately, the logic governing an autonomous vehicle decision to, say, brake or swerve. In all these cases, you must have absolute clarity on how the model operates and, critically, how it generates a specific output. You just have to know.
And the history of modern AI, especially deep learning, kind of created this problem in the first place, didn't it? We got this incredible accuracy, but we sort of sacrificed opacity to get there.
Precisely. Historically, deep learning models, especially those huge neural networks with millions, billions of parameters, they functioned as true black boxes.
Right.
They performed incredibly well, super high accuracy, but their internal reasoning, completely inaccessible to human reviewers. And that opacity is what created the trust deficit we see.
Makes sense.
Because if a decision maker, a doctor, a judge, a regulator, if they can't peer into the reasoning, how can they trust the outcome? It's impossible.
Yeah.
And this lack of transparency has led directly to unchecked ethical concerns, like the amplification of systemic bias and, frankly, catastrophic safety risks in critical applications.
So the market is demanding the shift to a glass box.
The entire market is demanding the shift to a glass box, something that guarantees transparent, justifiable reasoning. It's becoming table stakes.
And the agency here is, well, you can feel it. Our sources are indicating a critical acceleration in adoption, a real focus in 2025, specifically because global regulatory bodies are really tightening the screws.
That regulatory pressure is, without a doubt, the most significant accelerator right now. The market is basically being dragged into compliance, whether it likes it or not.
And there's data on this barrier, right?
Yeah, we have a really compelling piece of data that perfectly illustrates this bottleneck. A recent industry survey found that, get this, 68% of organizations cite lack of explainability as a major barrier to AI adoption in regulated sectors.
Wow, 68%. That's huge.
Think about that. Nearly two-thirds of organizations can't leverage powerful AI systems simply because they can't satisfy the trust and transparency requirements of their customers or, crucially, their regulators.
So it's an economic issue as much as an ethical one.
Absolutely. It's a profound economic and ethical roadblock that XAI is fundamentally designed to solve.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for the foundational concepts. Before we talk about the tools themselves, we really need to clarify the language around ethical development. Because you hear terms like ethical AI, responsible AI, fair AI. They get thrown around almost interchangeably sometimes. What's the precise difference? Are they different?
They are, yeah. They form a kind of layered hierarchy, you could say. Ethical AI is the broadest, most foundational concept. It's the overarching philosophy, the practice of developing and deploying systems that actually align with human-centric values and moral guidelines.
So like respect for human rights, privacy.
Exactly. Respect for human rights, personal autonomy, broad accountability. It's really the moral compass guiding everything else.
Okay, so if ethical AI is the philosophy, the big picture, what are the actionable layers beneath it?
Well, beneath that, you have responsible AI.
Right.
This refers more to AI that is developed and used strictly within the scope of, say, societal norms and existing laws.
Right.
It focuses more on the implementation side, the governance structures you need for morally responsible use within an organization.
Got it. And fair AI, that sounds more specific.
It is. Fair AI is highly specific and absolutely critical. It focuses exclusively on eliminating algorithmic bias to ensure equal treatment and opportunities, regardless of protected characteristics like race, gender, age, socioeconomic background, you name it.
So fairness is a key component of being ethical and responsible.
Precisely. Fair AI is one of the most measurable components necessary to achieve both ethical and responsible outcomes. You really can't have one without the others. Not properly, anyway.
That clarity is essential. Okay, now let's detail the 6 core principles that sources say guide the development of these ethical systems. Starting with the one XAI is really designed to address transparency and explainability.
Right. This is the engine driving so much of this. It mandates that shift we talked about from the opaque black box to the traceable, justifiable white box.
Which boosts credibility, allows for auditing.
Exactly. Enhances credibility, allows for effective troubleshooting when things go wrong, and enables proper auditing. And this is a critical engineering tension you always see. Achieving high transparency often requires using simpler, inherently interpretable models.
Which might not be as powerful.
Sometimes, yeah. Or it means introducing complexity in the explanation techniques themselves, these post hoc methods we'll talk about. The trade-off is often framed as accuracy versus interpretability. If you push for the absolute highest performance, using incredibly deep, complex neural architectures, you inherently sacrifice ease of explanation. Ethical development requires finding the right balance, the appropriate equilibrium for the context.
So the model needs to be accurate enough, but also transparent enough for its specific job.
Precisely. Especially in those high-stakes domains, you have to find that sweet spot.
That tension must constantly frustrate engineers, I imagine. Okay, the second principle, fairness and bias mitigation. This seems to be where the problem often starts, right? In the data itself.
Absolutely. This is crucial. The machine learning model is fundamentally only a reflection of the data it consumes.
Garbage in, garbage out. Or bias in, bias out.
Bias in, bias out is probably more accurate here. Biases aren't really born in the algorithm itself. They're inherited. They come from training data that reflects historical inequalities, societal prejudices, maybe just flawed data collection methods.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If, say, a dataset used for medical diagnosis heavily features patients from one demographic group, the resulting AI will likely perform poorly, maybe even dangerously, when applied to people from other groups.
So how do you mitigate that?
It requires rigorous, proactive measures. First, data scientists must strive to use diverse and representative datasets. That's step one. Second, organizations need continuous monitoring and auditing, not just at the start, but throughout the model's lifecycle. Things drift.
Constantly checking for bias creeping in.
Exactly. And third, they need to apply specific bias detection tools, things like model debugging frameworks, to actively flag and quantify potential discriminatory behavior before the model gets deployed into the real world.
Right. The third principle is about accountability and responsibility. This is a big one. When a system makes a decision, especially a harmful one, who is ultimately liable? Who's responsible?
This is perhaps the most vexing question for regulators, especially when you talk about autonomous vehicles or advanced medical diagnostic systems. Ethical AI demands clear liability frameworks.
So someone has to be on the hook.
Someone human has to be. Responsibility must be explicitly assigned, and that assignment has to fall on human entities. The developers who built it, the organizations deploying the system, or maybe even regulatory bodies setting the standards.
So you can't just blame the algorithm.
No. The structure of the system has to enforce human oversight as central. This means designing in kill switches, maybe, or override capabilities, ensuring that accountability is never fully delegated to an autonomous agent.
So if a decision is made, a human is ultimately responsible for the system design that led to it.
That's the goal. A human must ultimately stand responsible.
Okay, principle 4, privacy and data protection. Given the massive appetite modern AI has for data, this principle seems inherently tied to global legislation, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Non-negotiable compliance here. It's tied directly to standards like the EU's GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, among others.
Because AI needs so much data.
AI systems rely on massive data sets, often containing highly sensitive personal information. Ethical development just requires robust data protection practices all the way through the pipeline.
Like what kind of practices?
Secure data handling, obviously, usually via encryption. Rigorous anonymization techniques where possible. strict access control, who gets to see what data, and crucially, ensuring informed user consent is obtained and respected.
So users need control.
Users need clear, understandable control over how their data is being ingested, processed, and retained by the system. That's fundamental.
Next up, human oversight and autonomy. The goal isn't AI replacing us entirely, you said, but augmenting our abilities.
Exactly. Over-reliance on AI is a critical safety and ethical risk. The system should augment, enhance human expertise, not supplant it entirely.
Because some things can't be transferred to a machine.
Precisely. We have to preserve human judgment, particularly in those high-stakes domains. Think about a healthcare professional's empathy. Their ethical reasoning, those are non-transferable to a machine. Not really.
So the frameworks need to allow for humans to step in.
Yes, frameworks must be built to allow human intervention at specific, critical decision points. For example, a doctor might use an AI diagnostic tool, get insights from it.
But the final call is theirs.
But the human doctor retains the autonomy and, importantly, the legal authority for the final treatment decision. This ensures that the machine remains a tool, a powerful tool, but not the master.
Right. And finally, the principle that's becoming, well, impossible to ignore, sustainability and environmental impact.
Yeah, this has really come to the forefront recently. The enormous computational resources demanded by training these large-scale machine learning models, especially the massive foundation models, the LLMs we see everywhere now, they result in proportional energy consumption.
And a big carbon footprint.
And a significant carbon footprint. Ethical AI development have to account for this now. It means prioritizing efforts to optimize algorithms for energy efficiency, maybe moving away from constantly retraining massive models from scratch when incremental updates might do.
And thinking about where the energy comes from.
Absolutely. Adopting greener, renewable energy sources for data centers is becoming increasingly important. It's an ethical imperative, really, to ensure that the technological benefits of AI aren't just canceled out by environmental costs down the line.
Okay, so we understand why XAI is mandatory ethics, compliance, economics, all driving it. Now we need to move on to the practical how. Part 2 is our deep dive into the specific methodologies, the tools we use to actually open that black box. Let's start with the techniques that work on pretty much any model-agnostic approaches.
Right. Model-agnostic methods are kind of like the Swiss Army knife of explainability. Their real power lies in their independence.
Meaning they can work on anything.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They can explain virtually any underlying algorithm, regardless of how complex it is, without needing you to actually modify the model structure itself. They operate by treating the model as this opaque function and just probing its inputs and outputs to figure out its behavior.
Okay. And the two heavyweights people always mention here are S-shape and Lime. Let's start with a genuine deep dive into S-shape. I want a bit more than just the game theory metaphor, if we can.
Certainly. So S-shape stands for Shapley Additive Explanations. It's mathematically derived from something called Shapley values in cooperative game theory. It's generally considered the most rigorous method for attributing feature contribution.
Okay, how does it work conceptually?
Conceptually, it tries to determine the contribution of each individual feature to a specific prediction. It does this by comparing their prediction with that feature present versus without that feature present.
Simple enough.
But here's the catch. It does this comparison across every possible combination of other features being present or absent.
Wait, every possible combination? If you have like 100 features, that sounds like a combinatorial nightmare. How is that even possible?
It is. You're absolutely right. If you have hundreds or even dozens of features, calculating the marginal contribution for every single permutation is computationally impossible. It would take forever.
So how does S-shape work in practice then?
This brings us to the core challenge. In practice, SAP relies heavily on clever approximations and sampling techniques to estimate the true Shapley values, especially for large datasets or models with many, many features.
So it's an estimate, but a principled one.
Exactly. It provides a unified, theoretically sound measure of both global feature importance, what matters overall, and local feature importance, what mattered for this specific prediction. But its computational cost, that often requires significant processing time. That can be a major implementation barrier, especially for real-time systems or places with limited computing power.
Okay, that makes sense. It's rigorous, mathematically sound, but potentially slow and resource intensive. Now, how does Lime differ from that? It's supposed to be faster.
Lime, local interpretable model agnostic explanations, takes a fundamentally different and yes, often faster approach. Instead of trying to understand the whole complex model, Lime focuses exclusively on explaining individual predictions, one at a time.
So it doesn't try to map the entire thing?
No. If the global model is too complex, Lime basically says, okay, let's just generate a small, localized data set right around the specific prediction point we care about. Then, it trains a simple, inherently interpretable surrogate model, like a shallow decision tree or a simple linear regression just on that small local data slice.
So it's like saying, I can't explain the whole dense forest, but for this specific tree right here, here's a simple map or a simple rule that explains why it looks the way it does.
That's a great analogy, exactly. The benefit is speed, definitely, and often a more user-friendly output because the explanation comes from a simple model.
But there must be a downside.
The core limitation, often cited, is its stability. Because Lime only approximates the local decision boundary, if you perturb the input just slightly, the resulting local explanation model might change quite dramatically.
Ah, so the explanations might not be totally consistent.
They can be unstable or inconsistent sometimes. Which means for critical regulatory requirements where you need absolute consistency and auditability, the rigorous theoretical grounding of ESHAP often makes it the preferred choice for auditing, despite that computational overhead. Lime is often better suited for quick explanations, maybe for end-user consumption where you need a fast answer.
Okay, beyond ESHAP and Lime, you mentioned other techniques like counterfactual explanations and IC plots. How are those used practically?
Counterfactual explanations are actually incredibly powerful, especially for communicating transparency to consumers or people affected by a decision. They shift the focus from why something happened to how the outcome could be different.
Like what would need to change?
Exactly. So a bank might use it to tell a rejected loan applicant, look, if you had reduced your outstanding credit balance by, say, $1,500, you would likely have qualified. They offer actionable guidance, which builds trust.
That seems really useful. And IC plots.
ICE plots, individual conditional expectation plots, are more for the data scientists and engineers doing model debugging. They visualize how a model's prediction for a single instance changes as you vary just one feature across its range. It helps the engineers spot weird localized anomalies or unexpected behaviors within a model's response curve that a global explanation might miss.
Right. Now, switching gears a bit. If you prioritize explainability above absolutely everything else, maybe you wouldn't use a complex model at all. You might choose an inherently interpretable model right from the very start.
That's definitely an option. These are the true white box models, the ones that are transparent by their very design. Decision trees are a classic example.
Because you can follow the path down the branches.
Precisely. They provide clear, sequential rule paths that humans can easily trace. If income X and age Y, then predict Z. Very straightforward. Linear or logistic regression models are also inherently transparent because the coefficient, the number attached to each feature, directly quantifies its impact on the outcome. Double the income, double the effect, roughly speaking.
But they have limits, right? They can't handle everything.
That's the trade-off again. These simpler models often suffer from inherent limitations in their capacity. They struggle immensely with very high-dimensional data, lots of features or situations with highly nonlinear relationships between inputs and outputs.
Which is why people move to deep learning in the first place.
Exactly. That's why organizations often move to deep learning and thus run right into the XAI problem space, because they need that power to handle massive, complex data sets where simple models just don't cut it. It's that classic choice: high capacity and low interpretability versus lower capacity but high interpretability.
And to make even those complex models remotely accessible, we really rely heavily on visualization techniques.
Oh, visualization is absolutely the critical last mile for interpretability, making the complex understandable. Feature importance charts are pretty basic but essential, just showing a ranked list of the global drivers of a model.
But sometimes you need more detail.
Yes. In specialized domains, we need much greater specificity. In computer vision, using convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, we use saliency maps. These visually highlight the specific regions of an image, literally the pixels, that the network relied on most heavily for its classification.
So a doctor could see where the AI was looking on an X-ray.
Exactly. For a radiologist reviewing an AI diagnosis of a tumor, seeing a saliency map confirming the AI focused on the correct lesion area is absolutely vital for building trust and verifying the result.
And for language, like NLP.
Similarly, in natural language processing, especially with transformer models, we use attention visualizations. These reveal which specific words or sequences of tokens in a text passage most influence the model's classification outcome, like sentiment analysis or topic detection. This is now critical for aligning and auditing these massive LLMs.
This whole taxonomy really highlights the need to choose the right explanation method for the right audience, the right stakeholder, which brings us neatly to the distinction between global versus local explanations.
Yeah, this choice is entirely dependent on who needs the explanation and why. Global explanations aim to describe the model's overall behavior across the entire data set. This is essential for auditors, regulators, and the data scientists themselves who are performing model validation and trying to identify systemic biases.
So a global explanation might say something like,
It might show that, overall, income is the single most important factor driving loan approvals in this model. It's about the big picture trends.
and local explanations.
Local explanations, conversely, focus intensely on explaining why a single individual prediction was made. This is what helps end users, the subjects of the decision. It answers the question, why was my loan application denied? Or why did the AI flag this specific transaction as potentially fraudulent?
And this is key for regulations like GDPR.
Absolutely. It's crucial for satisfying that specific right to explanation mandated by regulations like GDPR. You have to be able to explain the individual case. So choosing the right method, global, local, SAP, LIME, visualization, it really depends on the stakeholders' specific needs and the regulatory requirements you have to meet.
Okay, so we've established the ethical necessity, the why, and we've looked at the technical toolkit, the how. Now we need to turn to the forces making this absolutely mandatory worldwide: regulatory pressure and global standards. This push wasn't accidental, was it? It seems quite deliberate and institutionalized.
Oh, it's a very rapid and you could say coordinated evolution. The shift from just academic interest to a global mandate has been accelerating incredibly quickly, really since the mid-2010s.
Where did it start?
Well, the foundational push for truly interpretable AI can probably be traced back to the U.S. DARPA XAI program, which launched way back in 2016. That really kickstarted serious research funding.
And then NIST got involved.
Right. By 2019, the U.S. NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, published its initial influential guidance on trustworthy AI. Then fast forward to 2021, and you see major standardization bodies like ISO beginning the process of formally developing international standards, specifically around AI transparency.
And the big one recently is the EU AI Act.
Yes, the culmination so far at least has been the EU AI Act proposal in 2023. This is huge because it formalized explicit, risk-based explainability requirements for systems designated as high risk, and its influence is expected to be global.
What are the key international bodies actually hammering out the detailed specifications for these standards? Who writes the rule books?
There are several key players working in concert, often overlapping. ISO-IAC JTC 1SC42 is the central international committee focusing on broad AI standards. They cover everything from terminology and frameworks to transparency, interpretability, and risk management.
Are there more specialized groups?
Yes, for specific domains, you have organizations like the IEP 7001. They're focused specifically on standardizing transparency requirements for autonomous systems, cars, drones, robots, which obviously demand real-time auditability for safety.
And on the more human rights side?
On the human-centric side, the UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence adopted in 2021 are really important. They provide a comprehensive global framework adopted by nearly 200 countries, emphasizing fairness, non-discrimination, sustainability, and the protection of privacy rights. It sets a high-level ethical bar.
Okay, let's focus now on the cornerstone regulations that companies are really grappling with day to day. The GDPR in the EU is often cited as the origin of this right to explanation. What does that practically require from an organization?
Yeah, the GDPR was a landmark. Article 22 specifically mandates that when an automated decision significantly affects an individual, think denial of employment, credit scoring, maybe insurance eligibility, the data subject has a legal right to obtain human intervention, to express his or her point of view, and to contest the decision. And importantly, they have a right to meaningful information about the logic involved.
Meaningful information, so not just the code.
Exactly. Not the code itself, but a comprehensible explanation of the factors that led to the decision and their significance. Practically, this forces organizations to generate things like detailed model cards or data sheets for data sets, documentation outlining the model's intended use, its training data, performance metrics, limitations, and crucially, how it makes decisions. It essentially formalizes the need for XAI documentation and methods.
And building directly on that foundation is the imminent EU AI Act. This is probably the highest profile piece of AI legislation in the world right now. And you mentioned it uses a risk-based approach. How does that work?
The EU AI Act is widely seen as a potential global blueprint. It classifies AI systems into different tiers of risk. Unacceptable risk, which are banned, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk.
And the focus is on the high-risk ones.
Yes, systems deemed high risk, and this includes a lot of critical applications like those used in recruitment, critical infrastructure management, law enforcement, medical devices, biometric identification. They face mandatory, very stringent requirements before they can be put on the market.
What kind of requirements?
Things like clear documentation of the system and its data, high levels of accuracy and robustness, mandatory human oversight capabilities built in, very robust data governance practices, and explicit transparency mandates, including explainability where appropriate for the user.
And there are penalties for non-compliance.
Oh yes. Critically, non-compliance with the EU AI Act can result in absolutely massive fines up to 35 million or 7% of the company's total worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher. That underscores that explainability and ethical compliance are no longer nice-to-haves or soft measures. They represent an existential financial risk.
Okay, how does the U.S. approach compare to this comprehensive, top-down EU framework? It sounds much more fragmented.
It is significantly less centralized, yes. The U.S. approach historically prioritizes fostering innovation alongside ensuring safety. It's currently driven primarily by White House executive orders, which focus on promoting trustworthy AI principles like transparency, fairness, and accountability.
But less binding law.
Less overarching federal law currently. It heavily relies on the guidance provided by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST offers excellent, detailed, but largely voluntary frameworks for building trustworthy AI systems. Without a single comprehensive federal legislative framework like the EU AI Act, compliance in the U.S. remains fragmented across various state laws like California CCPA and different sector-specific regulations like in finance or healthcare.
Which must make it complex for companies operating across the U.S.
It definitely makes the compliance burden more complex for organizations operating nationwide, yes.
And then there's China. Our sources suggest their governance approach seems to prioritize different goals altogether.
China's approach appears fundamentally driven by two main pillars: economic growth and national security. While they have published national ethical guidelines for AI, stressing things like ensuring AI is controllable, enhances human well-being, and promotes social stability.
But the focus is different.
The primary regulatory enforcement mechanisms often center on ensuring technology serves state interests and boosts economic competitiveness. Critics frequently raise concerns that this prioritization can lead to, for example, the development of massive state surveillance capabilities and perhaps a lack of robust, independent mechanisms to protect individual privacy rights, especially when you compare it directly to the GDPR's strong focus on individual rights and consent.
Right. Okay, beyond these broad geographic regulations, the requirements for XAI are often tailored to the specific risks within an industry. Let's look quickly at a few industry-specific standards. Healthcare.
In healthcare, the focus is hyper-specific. It's all about patient safety and ensuring the efficacy of clinical decision support tools. Regulatory bodies like the FDA in the U.S. have AML software guidelines that mandate rigorously documented performance and implicitly explainability.
Can you give an example?
Sure. An AI system designed to diagnose diabetic retinopathy from retinal scans, for instance, must be able to produce an interpretable output, maybe a saliency map highlighting the specific microaneurysms or hemorrhages it detected. So the ophthalmologist can independently verify the AI's findings against known clinical features before deciding on a treatment plan. Trust but verify.
And in finance, the driver seems largely economic risk and preventing discrimination.
Correct. Financial regulators globally, like the Federal Reserve or the European Banking Authority, require explainability for crucial functions like credit risk modeling, fraud detection, and insurance underwriting. Regulations stemming from bodies like the Basel Committee or enforced by agencies like the SEC demand explicit audit trails that can justify loan approvals and, importantly, denials.
Why is justifying denial so important?
This is absolutely essential for preventing discrimination and ensuring compliance with fair lending regulations. Without XAI, a bank would find it very difficult to prove definitively that a model's decision to deny a loan was based solely on objective, non-discriminatory financial factors and not influenced by protected characteristics.
Makes sense. And lastly, automotive, where safety is just paramount.
This is entirely safety critical, yes. Autonomous driving systems simply must operate with fully traceable and transparent decision logic. Standards like ISO 26262 for functional safety in road vehicles, along with emerging SAE standards for automated driving, require robust logging and explainability features.
An accident investigation.
Primarily, yes. If an autonomous vehicle is involved in an accident, investigators must be able to reconstruct the event by tracing the decision logic back from the action taken, like braking or steering, to the sensor inputs received. They need to confirm whether the system correctly identified a hazard, assessed the risk, and executed the appropriate maneuver. This often requires both global understanding of the system's design and Lime-like local explanations for specific critical moments combined with high-fidelity data logging.
Okay, we've covered the mandates, the why, and the how. Now we need to transition from the rules and tools to the real-world outcomes. Part 4 looks at how XAI is actually making a positive difference, but just as importantly, where things have gone wrong, sometimes spectacularly wrong.
Right, and when XAI is effectively integrated, the positive impact can be really profound. In healthcare, for example, explainability allows clinicians to move beyond just blind trust to a state of informed confidence.
How so?
Well, they can actively verify AI-driven diagnostics or treatment plan suggestions against the known patient clinical features, using things like feature importance or saliency maps we discussed. This ensures safety and efficacy. It's how XAI fosters effective human-machine teaming, preventing that dangerous over-reliance on opaque outputs we worried about earlier.
And for finance, that audit trail we mentioned seems key not just for regulators, but for business stability and customer trust too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
XAI provides those necessary audit trails not only for regulatory scrutiny in areas like fraud detection and risk modeling, but also for things like internal quality control and customer dispute resolution.
Like the loan denial example.
Exactly. If a customer is denied credit, being able to provide a clear, maybe even counterfactual explanation about why and potentially how they could achieve approval in the future, that builds trust and loyalty. It's much better than just issuing a generic, opaque rejection notice, which leaves people feeling powerless and potentially discriminated against.
Right. And what about in general business intelligence? Can XAI help there?
Definitely. In many operational contexts, XAI can transform decision-making. Think about HR departments. They can use transparent analytics and fairness audits on their hiring models to push for unbiased talent acquisition.
Right.
Or marketing teams, they can leverage interpretable customer segmentation models to actually understand why certain groups behave differently, allowing for more precise, effective, and potentially fairer resource allocation. When you can explain the why behind an operational decision, you're in a much better position to optimize it, both ethically and efficiently.
However, it's not all success stories. Our sources detail some pretty significant failures, often ironically from the very organizations that were supposed to be leading the charge on AI ethics. Let's look at the Google failures that are often cited.
Yes, these case studies really underscore the critical point that having ethical principles written down is completely insufficient. Rigorous technical implementation and continuous testing is absolutely everything. Google AI recruitment tool is a classic unfortunate example.
What happened there?
It was reportedly trained on historical hiring data, which itself reflected past biases favoring male candidates for technical roles. The AI apparently learned these biases and started penalizing resumes that included words like women's or references to all-female colleges. It essentially automated and amplified existing gender bias.
Wow. And similar issues with facial recognition.
Yes, numerous independent studies, as well as internal findings, show that their facial recognition technology suffered from significant racial bias. It exhibited much higher error rates for individuals with darker skin tones compared to lighter-skinned individuals.
Which has huge implications.
It has severe consequences if deployed in sensitive contexts like security screening or, worse, law enforcement identification. These weren't intentional, presumably, but they highlight the deep challenges in data representation and algorithmic fairness.
And this problem of biased data leading to biased outcomes seems particularly amplified in the criminal justice system, especially with tools used for predictive policing.
This is often held up as a classic, dangerous example of a harmful feedback loop. Predictive policing tools are frequently trained on historical crime data, arrest records, incident reports, etc.
But that data itself might be biased.
Exactly. If that historical data already reflects biased policing practices from the past, where, for instance, minority communities were disproportionately targeted for surveillance or arrests, regardless of actual crime rates, the AI will inevitably learn that bias.
And then?
It will then recommend allocating more police resources to those same areas, based on the biased data, More police presence naturally leads to more reported incidents and arrests in those areas, which then feeds back into the model as confirmation of higher crime rates.
Reinforcing the original bias.
Precisely. It reinforces and actually magnifies the original systemic bias, potentially leading directly to social injustice, community alienation, and the erosion of trust in law enforcement technologies. It's a very serious concern.
Even in the seemingly more benign world of ChatGPT and generative AI, ensuring ethical output presents unique moderation challenges, doesn't it? Just because of the sheer scale and nature of the training data.
Oh, the challenge for large language models? LLMs is immense. They are trained on truly vast swaths of the internet, text, images, code. This means they inevitably ingest not only the best of human knowledge and creativity, but also the absolute worst toxic language, harmful stereotypes, dangerous misinformation, deeply ingrained societal biases.
So how do companies try to manage that?
While the industry is currently heavily focused on alignment, this involves using techniques like reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, where human reviewers rate the model's outputs, trying to steer it away from generating harmful, biased, or untruthful content.
Is it working?
It's an ongoing process, ensuring these massive complex models do not inadvertently perpetuate harmful stereotypes or generate plausible-sounding but completely fabricated misinformation at scale remains a very active and complex research and moderation challenge. There are no easy answers yet.
This really brings us to the broader, almost existential ethical challenges and risks posed by advanced AI. The immediate threat seems to be misinformation and deepfakes.
Yes, the rapid advancement of generative AI, especially in image, video, and audio generation, means the creation of hyper-realistic manipulated media, those infamous deepfake videos and audio clones, is now becoming easily accessible, not just to state actors, but to almost anyone.
What's the danger there?
It fundamentally compromises authenticity. It can be used to damage reputations, incite violence, commit fraud, and at a geopolitical level, it threatens to undermine democratic processes through targeted disinformation campaigns. It erodes societal trust in what we see and hear.
And the tech is moving fast.
The ethical dilemma is that the generation technology seems to be outpacing our ability to develop reliable, scalable detection or verification methods. It's an arms race.
Then there's the ever-present risk of surveillance and privacy violations. AI seems to supercharge this threat.
It does. AI-powered facial recognition, combined with big data analytics, particularly when wielded by state authorities or large corporations with massive data repositories, poses a severe threat of ubiquitous surveillance and a chilling effect on civil liberties.
How so?
The ability to automatically cross-reference countless data points, location history, online activity, purchase records, social connections to create incredibly detailed profiles on individuals. Well, it necessitates extremely strict regulation, robust anonymization, and clear mechanisms for human intervention and appeal to prevent unjust profiling, discrimination, or the exploitation of sensitive personal information.
Economically, the fear of job displacement remains a major societal concern as automation advances rapidly across many sectors.
Yes, the potential for AI-driven automation to displace human workers, especially in sectors like manufacturing, transportation, retail, customer service, and even some white-collar jobs, is very real.
Is the challenge stopping it?
The core ethical challenge isn't necessarily stopping automation itself, which often brings productivity gains, but ensuring the economic benefits are distributed fairly and the societal disruption is managed humanely. It requires a proactive societal commitment from policymakers, educators, and businesses to invest heavily in large-scale retraining and upskilling opportunities for workers whose roles are likely to be automated.
So, focusing on transition and new skills.
Exactly. The focus must be on viewing AI as a tool that can augment human capabilities and potentially create new types of jobs, rather than purely as a displacement mechanism that benefits only a few.
And perhaps the most profound, even frightening ethical dilemma is the potential weaponization of AI, leading to lethal autonomous weapons systems, or law abuse, making decisions of life and death without direct human control.
This is arguably the most serious ethical frontier. Autonomous weapons capable of selecting and engaging targets, making irreversible life-or-death decisions without meaningful human intervention, raise massive questions about accountability, control, and compliance with international law.
What happens if they make a mistake?
If an autonomous system malfunctions, is hacked, or makes a mistake in target identification leading to civilian casualties or unintended escalation, establishing legal and moral liability is incredibly difficult. Who is responsible? The programmer. The commander who deployed it, the machine itself.
It risks escalation.
There's a huge risk of lowering the threshold for conflict, rapid unintended escalation, and potentially undermining adherence to the core principles of distinction and proportionality in international humanitarian law. For these reasons, ethical guidelines and international discussions almost universally prioritize retaining meaningful human control, keeping a human in the loop or human on the loop in the use of lethal force.
Finally, a more subtle but still important risk: over-reliance in healthcare dilemmas. We talked about AI augmenting doctors, but what if they trust it too much?
Yes, while AI holds tremendous promise for improving diagnostics and treatment planning, the risk of over-reliance by clinicians is real and needs careful management. We must guard against developing systems or workflows that inadvertently undermine the necessity of human clinical judgment, critical thinking, and, importantly, human empathy.
So the human element remains key.
The healthcare professional must remain the ultimate responsible agent in the patient's care. If an AI provides a diagnosis or recommends a treatment, the human clinician must have the tools, the explainability tools, and the training to critically evaluate that output, verify it against the broader clinical context and patient preferences, and retain the final ethical and legal responsibility for the decision. It's about enhancing, not replacing, that crucial human element.
Okay, the regulatory walls are clearly closing in, and the ethical risks are stark and varied. How are organizations, especially the big tech companies that develop so much of this foundational AI, actually responding to this pressure? Part 5 focuses on adoption, implementation, and the future landscape.
Well, it's clear that integrating ethics and explainability is now paramount, not just for compliance, but increasingly for competitive advantage. It signals trustworthiness to customers and partners, helps ensure regulatory compliance, and can actually enhance customer loyalty.
And big tech seems to be playing a big role.
Big tech, because of its immense influence, resources, and the scale at which it deploys AI, inevitably plays a critical role in developing the tools, setting the benchmarks, and shaping the norms for responsible deployment across the industry.
Let's briefly review the stated policies or approaches of some of the sector leaders, maybe starting with Google. They outlined their AI principles fairly early on, back in 2018.
Yes, Google's publicly stated principles emphasize their commitment to developing AI that is socially beneficial, avoids creating or reinforcing unfair bias, is built and tested for safety, is accountable to people, incorporates privacy design principles, and upholds high standards of scientific excellence. They also notably pledge not to use AI for weapons or certain surveillance applications.
A strong set of principles, though, as we discussed, implementation can be challenging. What about Microsoft? They seem to have built a more comprehensive internal framework and governance structure.
Microsoft has been quite proactive. Their responsible AI framework is built on core principles like fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. A crucial internal mechanism they established is their AETHER Committee, which stands for AI and Ethics in Engineering and Research.
What does AETHER do?
It's a high-level advisory body composed of senior leaders from across the company: research, engineering, legal, policy. It's designed specifically for internal oversight, reviewing sensitive or high-risk AI projects, developing internal policies and best practices, and generally promoting a culture of responsible AI development across the entire organization. They really try to embed these controls early in the design phase.
And IBM. They've been in the AI game for a long time and are known for contributing tools back to the broader industry.
IBM has indeed been a pioneer in enterprise AI and has long stressed principles like fairness, transparency, and robustness in their solutions. They notably created and then open-sourced the AI Fairness 360 Toolkit back in 2018.
What does that toolkit do?
It provides a collection of metrics to check for unwanted bias in datasets and machine learning models, along with algorithms to help mitigate that bias. By open sourcing it, they aim to help developers and data scientists across the entire industry move beyond just talking about principles to having actionable engineering solutions for building fairer AI systems.
Even the newest major players, like OpenAI, seem to have ethical alignment right at the core of their mission statement, especially given the power of their models.
Indeed. OpenAI's charter, from its inception, has explicitly focused on ensuring that artificial general intelligence, when developed, benefits all of humanity. Their mission emphasizes developing AI that is safe, fair, and critically aligned with human values. This focus on safety and alignment is particularly crucial, given the scale and influence of their large language models like GPT-4. They view safety not just as a feature, but as a foundational requirement for maximizing the benefits of powerful AI while minimizing potential catastrophic risks.
Now, to make these policies actually function day to day within large organizations, you need some kind of governance structure. The emergence of internal AI ethics committees or responsible AI governance boards seems essential for operationalizing this.
They are absolutely crucial, yes. You can't just rely on individual developer goodwill.
Yeah.
These committees or boards typically consist of diverse stakeholders. You need representation from developers, data scientists, product managers, but also crucially from legal experts, ethicists, risk and compliance officers, maybe even social scientists or community representatives, depending on the context.
And what's their role? It sounds complex.
Their role is definitely multifaceted and complex. They often review proposed AI projects, especially high-risk ones, for potential ethical risks before development starts. They help ensure transparency protocols are being followed, that bias testing is adequate. They also guide the organization through those really complex, sometimes contradictory ethical dilemmas, like how do you balance a new AI feature's potential performance gains against a slight, maybe unavoidable, increase in bias for a particular subgroup.
So they provide checks and balances.
Exactly. This kind of cross-disciplinary review provides necessary checks and balances and helps embed ethical considerations throughout the entire development lifecycle, rather than treating it as an afterthought.
So, okay, for any organization listening right now, maybe a smaller one without huge resources, what are the concrete, practical steps they should be taking to implement this kind of ethical framework? Where do they start?
It really is a lifecycle commitment, even for smaller players. Step 1. Start with ethical design from the ground up. This means thinking about and defining clear ethical objectives and considering potential societal impacts before you even write the first line of code. Ask, should we build this at all? What are the risks?
Okay, think first. What's step 2?
Step 2. Focus intensely on bias mitigation in data. This requires rigorous auditing of your training data. Are there known historical biases? Is it representative of the population you'll deploy to? It means actively seeking diverse data sources or using techniques to rebalance or augment your data sets.
Then comes transparency.
Step 3. Implement transparency and explainability. Deploy specific XAI methods appropriate for your use case, whether it's SHAP for auditability, LIME for user feedback, or clear decision trees if possible. Couple this with regular fairness audits using tools like IBM's Fairness 360 or Google's What If tool, and publish clear documentation, like model cards.
And it doesn't stop at deployment, right?
Absolutely not. Step 4. Establish continuous monitoring and governance. You need frameworks and processes for regular auditing after deployment. Models drift, data changes, new biases can emerge. You need to track performance, fairness metrics, and the validity of your explanations over the model's entire operational life. It's an ongoing cycle.
Right. Now, the technological landscape is obviously not static. AI is evolving incredibly quickly, which means our governance frameworks and ethical thinking must constantly try to anticipate future threats and opportunities. What are the major emerging trends shaping the future of XAI and ethical AI?
Well, the most immediate one is the continued explosion of generative AI and LLMs. The focus there is shifting heavily towards ensuring authenticity disclosures users absolutely must know when they're interacting with AI or consuming AI-generated content, partly to combat deepfakes and misinformation.
And managing bias at scale.
And ensuring that the amplified biases or potential for generating harmful content inherent in models trained on web-scale data are rigorously managed and mitigated. The regulatory focus on generative AI transparency and safety is going to be intense globally.
You raised a major, perhaps longer-term threat earlier that affects not just AI, but the entire global security apparatus, quantum AI. How does the prospect of powerful quantum computers force us to urgently rethink current XAI and especially privacy frameworks?
Quantum computing presents a truly profound, potentially existential risk to our current data security paradigms. Most of our existing digital security, the encryption protecting financial transactions, health records, government communications, relies on mathematical problems that are effectively impossible for even the most powerful classical computers to solve in a reasonable time frame.
But quantum computers could solve them.
However, it's theorized that large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computers, when built, could potentially break many of these widely used public key encryption standards, like RSA and ECC, relatively easily using algorithms like Shor's algorithm.
Making currently encrypted data vulnerable retrospectively.
Yes, this leads to the threat of harvest now, decrypt later, where adversaries could be capturing encrypted data today, planning to decrypt it once quantum computers become powerful enough. This means the potential for massive, invasive surveillance and a catastrophic loss of data privacy is a very real future threat.
So what's the implication for ethical AI development today?
It means developers and organizations must urgently focus on understanding and planning the transition to post-quantum cryptography, PQC solutions now. NIST is already standardizing PQC algorithms. If an organization is collecting and storing highly sensitive personal data today, especially data that needs to remain secure for decades, they arguably have an ethical obligation to ensure that data is secured not just against today's threats, but against the credible threat of future computational power. It adds a whole new temporal dimension to data protection ethics.
Wow. That dramatically increases the need for trustworthy, auditable, perhaps tamper-proof records of how data is handled and how decisions are made. Which brings us to another emerging trend, the potential utility of blockchain for transparency in AI systems.
Exactly. There's growing interest in leveraging decentralized ledger technology like blockchain to potentially provide an auditable, immutable, tamper-proof trail of AI model development, deployment, and decision-making.
How would that work?
Organizations could, for instance, use blockchain to securely record cryptographic hashes of the training datasets used, the exact parameters or version of the model deployed, maybe even key decisions or predictions made by the system over time.
Creating an undeniable audit trail.
Precisely. This could enforce accountability, especially over long deployment periods or in complex multi-stakeholder ecosystems, by allowing regulators or auditors to trace back exactly how a specific decision was reached, linking inputs to outputs via a specific model version in a way that cannot be easily falsified or altered by internal actors after the fact. This kind of immutable audit trail could be particularly critical for highly regulated sectors like finance or healthcare supply chains.
And ultimately, looking at the big picture, the future of governance seems to necessarily center on finding the right balance in AI and human collaboration.
Yes, the next phase of AI development and governance must prioritize designing and deploying AI as an augmentation tool, one that enhances human capabilities, improves efficiency, and tackles complex problems while consciously preserving human dignity, autonomy, and critical judgment.
So keeping humans in charge.
Governance frameworks must mandate system designs that keep humans firmly in the loop or on the loop for critical decisions, allowing them to understand, influence, and ultimately override AI recommendations when necessary. The goal should be ensuring that the technology enhances our collective capabilities rather than inadvertently displacing our responsibility or undermining our autonomy.
This has been an incredibly detailed and I think really crucial deep dive into a topic that honestly affects every single facet of our increasingly digital existence. To try and synthesize the most crucial actionable takeaway for you, the listener, ethical AI, explainable AI. It's just no longer a philosophical aspiration or a nice to have.
Not at all.
It is an absolute economic and legal necessity now, driven relentlessly by global regulation and the fundamental market demand for explicit trust in these powerful systems.
That's exactly it. Those core principles we discussed, transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, human oversight, sustainability, they must be actively engineered and embedded throughout the entire AI lifecycle. It has to start from initial data acquisition and model design, all the way through to post-deployment monitoring and eventual retirement of the system.
So organizations need to act now.
Organizations absolutely must urgently audit their existing AI models and systems for explainability gaps, for potential biases, for compliance issues, and they need to align their future development pipelines with recognized standards and best practices, like those being issued by ISO, NIST, and required by regulations like the EU AI Act.
It requires a collective effort then.
Absolutely. The path forward requires a unified, collective commitment. It needs developers building responsibly, policymakers setting clear and sensible rules, businesses investing in ethical practices, and indeed, users demanding transparency and accountability.
And as we close this deep dive, we're left with perhaps the most profound and maybe slightly unnerving long-term challenge raised by our source material. Thinking about that emerging reality of quantum AI and its potential power to break all our current cryptographic standards, the very foundations of digital data privacy as we know it, how must the focus on privacy within today's ethical AI frameworks urgently adapt to anticipate that future? A future where data security might no longer be able to rely on conventional encryption methods.
This is a huge question.
What is the current immediate ethical responsibility of developers and organizations today to begin seriously planning for and perhaps even implementing post-quantum cryptography standards to protect the sensitive data they hold now from the threat of future computational power? That's a heavy question of long-term accountability and one worth exploring immediately.